Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Robust Opposition. With me is Stephen Jaffe, and Stephen Jaffe is a Bernie-crat from San Francisco who is just announced that he is challenging Nancy Pelosi in the primary. So I'm very pleased to welcome Stephen here tonight.
Last election cycle in 2016, a man named Preston Pekas did challenge Nancy, and in fact, he was successful in getting a rather impressive 20% of the vote. So I'm hopeful that I will exceed that, but I think Preston put on a terrific fight. My goal is to cause a spectacular upset here. And
that would be great, because although Nancy Pelosi has a reputation for being extremely progressive, we don't feel that she's been acting very progressively in the Congress since she's been leading it all these years. And I wanted to ask you first to describe a little bit about your background, your involvement with the Democratic Club that you started, your involvement with the Bernie Sanders campaign, to let us know a little bit about you.
I am a lawyer by trade, and I have been a lawyer for a very long time, 46 years. The bulk of my practice for the last about 2.5 or 3 decades has been in the area of employment law. I represent employees only. I do not ever represent employers. So that's made me a person that employers don't like to see on the other side of a lawsuit. Most of my defendants, people that I sue or settle with, are very large corporations, Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies. I've been doing that for a long time. The practice is representing individuals who have had unfortunate incidents or been mistreated in the workplace, class-based protections, age, race, gender, religion, nationality. Everybody knows the list. So that's where I come from professionally. About 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and I and another of our friends named Sue Bushnell formed what is called the South Beach District 6 Democratic Club. And we have become quite a robust little organization here in San Francisco. We have authored and initiated a great many initiatives and resolutions which have gone on to be adopted by the Democratic County Central Committee. The most recent of those is a dark money resolution, which we passed in October and was passed last Wednesday, DCCC, unanimously, which is unheard of for that body because it's extremely contentious there. If anybody who knows anything about San Francisco politics knows, it's quite contentious. My involvement with Bernie Sanders began rather early on. I really like his politics. I like him as a person. I have tremendous admiration for him for his independence and integrity. And I was working for him as much as I could. I sent him money, a call from a local organizer with whom I think you're familiar, Margaret. And
Yeah.
she wanted me to help work with them locally, but I told them that I didn't mean to be immodest, but that I had real skills that could be exploited and used by the national campaign in supervising primaries and caucuses. So I was then put in touch with the national campaign, and within about 2 or 3 weeks, I was in Las Vegas helping to supervise the extremely chaotic Nevada caucuses. The Nevada State Democratic Party really didn't have much of an open mind or ear to listen to the complaints that we were filing with them on caucus day. And it took a long time for them to absorb the information and data that we sent them. um, in written form and reports from people who were on the ground there. But eventually, and it was literally some months later, they actually changed the result of the caucus based on the reports that we had given them.
Tell us what the issues are that you think Nancy Pelosi has stopped representing her constituency on.
First and foremost, I think, is the issue of health care. That seems to be the centerpiece issue for many the congressional races right now. I am absolutely 100% in favor of single-payer health care. Not any compromised, watered-down version of it. I think whether you adopt single-payer health care is like being married or pregnant. Either you are or you're not. And I think whether you adopt single-payer health care, there's a way to make a compromised version of that without taking away the benefits of single-payer health care. Ms. Pelosi's been asked over and over again whether or not she supports single-payer health care, otherwise known as Medicare for all. And I have come to learn from the last years deeply involved in politics, the two most rare words you will ever hear from professional politicians are yes and no. Professional politicians are often asked questions which can be easily answered yes or no. Instead, they may be asked a question. The example I use when I'm arguing in court to a jury is if someone asks you what time it is, don't tell them how to make a watch. Well, a politician can be asked a yes or no question, and instead of providing a yes or no answer, they'll make a 5-minute speech, never really answering the question.
Yes.
It's my intention just to try to be a yes or no guy. And if anybody wants to know more or why or whether I should elaborate, I will do so. But I want to answer questions as simply and plainly and directly as possible.
But 64% of the California Democrats have signed on to H.R. 676. So I made it a personal mission to go to as many town halls as I could during the recess to pin down these Congress members on just what you're saying. And I can tell you about the answer that Brad Sherman just gave. And basically, he was saying that right now they're trying to save Obamacare. And it wouldn't look good tactically, this was his explanation, for the Republicans to be able to say, look, here's this Democrat saying we should repeal and replace Obamacare, even if it's with single payer. And so, Linda Sanchez tried to say that. She said that at her town hall, that we have to pick our battles. And right now she's trying to save, the ACA. Well, Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, he has a YouTube show, did an episode about that. It was called Congressional Democrat or Corporate Democrat Doesn't Support Medicare for All. He did a whole show. He showed the video in which she was asked this question and talked about picking her battles. And 58,000 people watched that segment. He told them in the video to call her office. People were reporting on the YouTube video in the comments that the lines were shut down. And wouldn't you know, 4 days later, she signs on to the bill. So it's a little bit of a story on how pressure, and in the last month, 32 Democrats have signed on. And now for the first time, the majority of Democrats have signed on to that bill. So I know full well from firsthand experience exactly what you're talking about regarding the lack of a yes or no answer. And Nancy Pelosi, we actually, 6 of us went out to her town hall, which was, it wasn't a town hall exactly. It was she was the guest star at the Rally to End Child Poverty. And this was Autumn Burke's, a local state assemblyman's bill. And we were there, and every time she mentioned health care, we shouted out single payer now. And when she finally addressed us, she did it in a very disparaging way. She pointed to us and said, some people will have their complaints. And so I thought that was very interesting that she was talking about activism and how activists had to get behind this bill to end child poverty. And here we were activating about single payer, and she referred to us as complainants.
On March 25th, she gave a town hall at Balboa High School in San Francisco. And because San Francisco is about 80% District 12 and the rest is Jackie Spear's district, she sat there with Jackie Spear. But Ms. Pelosi was, I guess the only word to use is heckled a great deal. During that town hall about single payer health care. And at one point, Ms. Pelosi made a statement which then and now still has me scratching my head, which is the following. Ms. Pelosi said, Obamacare is really to the left of single payer health care. And that's a strange thing for her to say. And it causes me concern for two reasons. One, it means that that she may not actually comprehend or understand what this issue is about or what single-payer healthcare means. Secondly, watching her in that town hall that day, it became abundantly clear, I think as it did at your event, that Ms. Pelosi is really disconnected with her constituents. In this case, her real 12th district San Francisco constituents. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I think people in the 12th district have a right to be represented in Congress by a congressperson who shares their views and values and not who sees themselves on the national stage as Ms. Pelosi does.
And she also said, if you want single payer, what you should do is support state options. And I found that very interesting because the Democratic Party did not support Colorado Care. In fact, Hickenlooper and Bennett and the former Democratic governor of Colorado all came out against it. And why is that? It's for the issue that we always bring up, money in politics. The Democrats are too addicted to the corporate money, and therefore they don't want to support anything that will rub their donors the wrong way. And that is why Nancy Pelosi keeps getting reelected, as minority leader, because she's such a prodigious fundraiser.
You're right that she does raise a lot of money, but from where does she get it? She gets it from big corporations, insurance companies, banks, healthcare corporations, big pharma, the very people who have a stake and an interest in preventing single payer. And that's why she's not for it, because it would cut off her flow of money.
Let's get back to some of the other issues. So there's single payer, and I know from talking to my friend Ben Becker, who's another Bernie-crat from San Francisco that I work closely with, that affordable housing is a big concern in San Francisco. Here in Los Angeles, they've kind of ceded control to developers in the neoliberal public-private partnership. Like, if we just allow the developers to build more housing, and make them allocate a certain percent to affordable housing, then we'll have our affordable housing. And it really hasn't worked out like that, which is why I was one of the few progressives I know who actually supported Measure S, which would have put a moratorium on development to sort of force them to update their community plans. Because what happens is the big developers come in and they get a variance. It's called spot zoning. And they can come in and build these big projects, and we're just choked with traffic. I mean, and you at least have a better mass transit system in San Francisco than we do. So, but I know that affordable housing is a huge issue. In your platform, what would be your plan to get affordable housing to residents of San Francisco?
The experience that you're having in Los Angeles is repeated up here. We have a mayor who I think used to be rather progressive, but has now more or less sold his soul to the developers. And the developers claim they are for affordable housing. By developers, I mean real estate developers, construction companies, banks, everyone who is associated with the construction of new buildings. And they say they're for it, and then they say, well, but we're going to dedicate a certain percentage of our, excuse me, of our building to subsidize affordable housing. See, look what we're doing for affordable housing. Well, if that percentage is, for example, 25% or 30%, what they're leaving out is that leaves them 75% or 70% of market rate in which they are going to wreak huge profits. And what's in it for the mayor and the city? What's in it is an increased tax base and more money flowing into the city, so the whole cycle gets repeated. So what has to be done is the kinds of moratoria that you're talking about, stopping the endless construction of these huge high rises. And if anything's going to be constructed, it ought to be buildings which are in fact 100% affordable housing, not a percentage which is essentially a gift to the developers.
Now let's talk about Wall Street because Nancy Pelosi was asked a question in July. I was doing a little bit of research on Nancy today, and she was asked a question in July of 2015, and it was relating to Wall Street regulation, and she said that there was no consensus among the Democrats that the Obama administration should enforce stricter regulations on Wall Street. And obviously, that's because she needs the Wall Street money. And as we've seen, Dodd-Frank really did not go far enough. And as soon as it was enacted, the banks put all sorts of people on it in terms of the administration of it, the regulations of it, to weaken the regulations and to weaken the enforcements. And now, of course, Trump is at work trying to get rid of financial regulations altogether. And this new trade agreement that they've been negotiating for years, which we who have been fighting the TPP have found maybe even worse than the TPP. It's called the TISA, the Trade and Services Agreement. And it would roll back financial regulations to the mid-1990s, which is pretty much before they had them. What are we going to do about Wall Street on a local level? I know that my friend Eric Brooks and some other San Francisco residents have been working to try to get a public bank in San Francisco. I know I've been working to try to get a public bank in the state. Everything that's been privatized has not been working on behalf of the people. So I'm of the mind that we should try to put things back into the hands of the public, such as a public bank, such as public housing, such as single-payer health care, such as, public broadband. So I want to know what your thinking is on some of those issues.
Well, it's kind of a no-brainer to figure out that the financial industry is at present underregulated, and if Trump has his way, it will be unregulated. It will be just a free-for-all, and that will result in the same kind of concentration of wealth welling up to the top of that particular container, just the same as it has in other kinds of industries. So I think the first thing that needs to be done federally is for a new look to be taken at re-regulating the banks. I mean, I'm not a youngster. I remember the days when banks were severely more regulated, and everybody did just fine. Okay, then we had 2008, and the financial markets crashed. Some new things were put into place, but they have been shriveling and deteriorating away. So now we have Mr. Trump who wants to take them all away. So I think there needs to be a congressional study of re-regulating the banks and the financial industries, not just banks, but the ancillary industries, insurance companies. Money is being made in all kinds of side operations, mortgage servicing companies, credit card companies. I mean, the whole financial industry has been preying on the middle class and poor people, and that's got to be stopped. And I have a lot of ideas about that.
I agree with you. And I think the payday lenders and the check cashing places are out of control. They charge usurious interest rates. A lot of these poorer communities are underbanked. But one of the big things that I don't think Bernie talked about, one of the big stories, and his budget staffer, Matt Stoller, who writes a lot for The Atlantic, I'm a big fan of his writing, is monopolization. And I spoke with Tim Canova about this at Occupy Inauguration. We have had such monopolization over my lifetime. I mean, I was just recounting to somebody growing up in the 60s and 70s what mom and pop stores looked like, the local camera store, the local stationery store, the local pharmacy, and the local grocery store. Now everything is owned by 5 companies. There's 5 media companies, 5 airline companies, 5 big food companies. And when you have such monopolization, you don't have any choices for either the worker or the consumer. It's like you can't say, if you don't pay me more, I'm going to go apply over there, because they're all in cahoots. In fact, the airlines are being investigated. I'm actually shocked that an antitrust investigation is going on, because what happened was when the price of oil went down, jet fuel is their biggest expense. So the price of oil went down, and yet their ticket prices kept going up. So why was that happening? Because they were colluding. The head of, the airlines were talking to each other and saying, let's not lower prices. Let's just keep raising prices.
Right.
And this is,
anybody who remembers College Economics 101 knows that in an absolute free market capitalist economy, we will end up with one company monopolizing everything. The best illustration I heard of that was my college professor, who used to talk about how John D. Rockefeller, when he started Standard Oil of New Jersey, there would be an intersection where there'd be 4 gas stations, and his would be one of them. So what he would do, he would drop the price of his gasoline a few cents a gallon until one of the stations couldn't compete and went out of business. Then he'd drop it some more, and he'd keep dropping the price until way below what it should have been, and to the point where he was losing money, until pretty much the other 3 gas stations would be gone. They could not compete with Mr. Rockefeller. Then, of course, after everybody was gone, guess what happened to Rockefeller's prices? Right through the roof, where they stay. Well, that is basic economics. And when there's only, as you say, 5 media companies, 5 department store holding companies in any industry, that is going to be the natural evolution of this. We need greater enforcement of the antitrust laws. They have not really been enforced since the days of Clinton, and maybe before that. The 80s was really the last time I recall antitrust law being enforced. I was very concerned. Alaska Airlines just bought my favorite airline, Virgin America Airlines.
Yeah.
And I was distressed about that because I love Virgin Airlines. And Branson, who owns Virgin, couldn't do anything about it. There was an argument made that, this is going to cause monopolies. How many real airlines do we really have? Look who's gone. TWA, Pan Am, the list of airlines gone is astounding, and that's because of mergers.
Let's talk about this, okay? Because this is another Pelosi thing that I looked up. She said, she was asked a question by a young man who is in horrible debt, living with his parents, and he was asking her about what could be done. Shouldn't the Democrats have a more populist platform? This capitalist system that we're living in is hurting everyone. And her answer was, we're capitalists, and that's just the way it is.
Some portions of our economy are capitalists, but once again, as I say, if we're pure capitalists, we're all going to wind up being owned by about a dozen companies. We are not capitalists when we run Medicare, when we run Medicaid. We are not capitalists when we finance our police departments and fire departments. We are not capitalists for all the things that the government does for us. The only place we're capitalists are for private corporations to enhance their shareholders' wealth.
I think we have socialism for the rich and rugged individual capitalism for everybody else. I mean, the banks were bailed out and the homeowners were sold out. That was a famous Occupy slogan. Let me ask you something. Were you involved at all in the Occupy movement in San Francisco?
Peripherally, but not directly.
Socialism is now very popular, especially among young people. I mean, there was that Pew study that showed that among young people, among millennials, socialism actually is more popular than capitalism. So it doesn't surprise me that Bernie Sanders, running as a Democratic socialist, would do so well among young people. And this may be the direction that we have to go. We may have to start talking about this again, you know?
Well, I think socialism has been, as a word, slandered. People have a connotation to socialism, and a lot of people who are not the most educated in the world equate socialism and communism. And they equate socialism with dictatorship. And of course, none of that is even remotely true. So I think a lot of education has to be done as to what is meant when a person uses the word socialism. It means using common funds for the common good. That's all it means. Police departments, fire departments, health care for the poor. That's what it is. Medicare is socialism. It's pure socialism.
Well, I see Bernie as an FDR New Deal, a liberal, pretty much. You know, I don't really think his ideas are too far out, and basically he's just espousing FDR's second Bill of Rights. But let me ask you about, again, California, because we have an opportunity here in California to do things because we have a Democratic majority that other states can't do. We can do things in terms of the environment. We can do things in terms of sanctuary cities. How would you see going into Congress, working with the rest of the congressional delegation to use this state sort of as a laboratory? Because, okay, this relates to a question that I was going to ask you about. Why would you even want to go into Congress when it's controlled by Republicans, and the Republicans are so reactionary and so obstructionist?
I want to go into Congress so other people like me will also run for Congress and put the Republicans out of control of Congress. Politics, the pendulum swings back and forth. Right now, it's Republican. Someday in the future, it will be controlled by Democrats. I just hope that the damage being done by the Republican Congress and the current White House occupant isn't so severe that it cannot be repaired.
Well, so getting back to my original, or the start of that question, how would you work with the rest of your congressional delegation to try to resist the Trump agenda, assuming that Democrats don't regain Congress? What could we do here in California? Have you thought about that?
Anyone who pays attention or paid attention to the Republican town halls that were recently held, where it was the Republican congressmen and senators who were really grilled by their own people, mostly on health care, but also on some other issues. I think that I would use the California example as a argument and persuasion that the Republican congressmen have to really get down and back to their constituents and find out what the hell they're thinking, because I think some of them are as disconnected from their constituents as Ms. Pelosi is disconnected from hers. And that is one way that I would do that. I would try to make more direct connections between the congressmen, Republican or Democrats, and their constituents, because as you say, there is a strong wave of populism and progressiveness washing over the country right now. And if that's communicated to the people who are in Congress, that will make a change.
Well, I've been doing a lot of shows about Russia baiting. I had on Norman Solomon last Wednesday, and he wrote an excellent article in Common Dreams, which I had been saying the same thing, which is that the Democratic Party has been, so focused on this Russiagate thing that they are fomenting a new Cold War, which could turn into a hot war. And actually, Trump did bomb the airfield in Syria there to prove that he was not in cahoots with Putin. And then Norman wrote another article 10 days later in Truthdig, in which he said the Democratic elite are going down this road because they don't want to accept the results of the election, which is that they ran the wrong candidate, who ran the wrong kind of campaign, and that if they really want to regain the House in 2018, and I actually said this at my Congressman Ted Lieu's town hall, that they have to start focusing on the issues that the American people are concerned about, such as affordable health care, affordable housing, a living wage, education, crushing student debt, right? So, what is your thinking about the way the Democrats right now are focusing on Russia?
Well, I have two answers to that. One relates to Ms. Pelosi, which I'll talk about first. You know, when the emails were first leaked and it came out that the DNC had, in fact, been screwing around and essentially cheated Bernie out of the nomination, which I believe to this day. The Democrats seized on the issue of, as you say, who did this to us? It's the Russians. The Russians did it, and they carried on and on and on about how they'd been hacked and what a terrible thing it was. You didn't hear anything about the substance of the emails. You didn't hear anything about, oh, yeah, well, we were cheating, you know. And at that point, I really didn't expect to have Hillary say anything because she was the beneficiary of the cheating. But Ms. Pelosi didn't say a word. She was arguably the leader of the Democratic at that point, aside from Hillary, and I feel it was incumbent upon her to step up and say, yes, these emails are out. Yes, we did this. Yes, it was wrong. We should not have done this. But instead of acknowledging the substance of those emails, she went on, kept endorsing. I'm not sure if she endorsed Debbie Wasserman Schultz's reelection, and she remained in that camp, and I think remains there to this day, never saying anything or acknowledging about what went on, how Bernie got screwed out of the nomination. Even when Donna Brazile said, yeah, I'm caught too, I fed debate questions to Hillary. Everybody just yawned.
But
That's the problem.
Have you been following this court case in Florida with Jared Beck?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Now, the Democrats to this day, even today, the Democrats, they're making a legal argument to the court, and I understand why they're making it. The legal argument to the court is this is political activity and the courts may not enter it. But what they're really saying is we, the Democrats, have a right to screw around and cheat, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. I don't believe that's the law, and I'll tell you why I don't believe that's the law, because the primaries are not a purely Democratic Party run operation. The primaries use the machinery of the state. They use the state polling places, the state voting apparatus to cast the votes and collect them. Once you bring the state into the process, you do have a right not to cheat, not to be cheated, I'm sorry. You don't have a right to cheat or screw around with the result. Can you imagine if the governor of California said, well, we got the results here on the presidential election, but I'm the governor and I have a right to change it, so I'm just going to make it whatever I want. That is un-American and it's immoral.
I don't think the lawsuit is accusing them of changing the result. I think the lawsuit is accusing them of being partial to one candidate. And what they're saying is they're a private organization, like you said, and they don't have to be impartial. If they wanted to go into a back room and pick their candidate, he's trying to argue that they have the legal right to do it.
Then why hold the primary?
Right. Well, it's a facade. It's an illusion.
That's right. Well, don't you think the voters have a reasonable expectation that their votes are going to be counted fairly? Well, it's a fraud on the voters.
So Jared Beck said that people who donated $27 to Bernie Sanders were relying on the fact that their primary would be conducted in an impartial manner. And I'm saying that that statement is a little sketchy, because when I think of somebody who would donate $27 to Bernie Sanders, I don't think they're thinking about the way the primary process would be conducted.
I confess to you, I don't understand the causal connection between a donation to one candidate and the fairness of the primary process. Right. There's a disconnect there. When a Democrat goes to the poll to vote, that Democrat has a reasonable expectation of that process being conducted fairly. that the votes will be counted fairly. And to say, well, we didn't cheat, we just had a bias, that's a distinction without a difference. The bias is the cheating. If Schultz and her group convinced CNN and other stations not to cover Bernie, but to cover Hillary, to me, that's a form of cheating.
Yeah, well, I think the worst thing is the superdelegates, and a lot of my viewers may not know this, so I'm going to tell them. Tad Devine was Bernie's media advisor and his chief strategist. So he also was a guy who worked for the DNC back in the 80s, and he helped devise the superdelegate system. In the 68 election, well, actually the 68 election, prior to that, they would decide who the nominees were in the back room, the smoke-filled back room deals with the party bosses would determine it. And then McGovern opened up the primaries after 68. And so the rules that he had were so that the people in the states would decide through the primaries and the caucuses. But then what happened was McGovern got nominated as a result of this more fair process. And he was too progressive for the party. So the Democratic Party pretty much sat on their hands during the 1972 election. And also Labor. I remember reading about George Meany and the AFL-CIO. They didn't like McGovern either, so they didn't provide any help. And McGovern got slaughtered. After that, they decided they wanted to be able to put their thumb on the scales so that they wouldn't have someone this radical. And so Tad Devine helped them devise the superdelegate system. And if you Google this, he said to the Wall Street Journal at the time, that is so a Huey Long style demagogue or populist or a Norman Thomas style socialist could not get the nomination. And I wasn't familiar with Norman Thomas. I knew his name, but I looked him up on Wikipedia. And sure enough, if he didn't have the exact same platform as Bernie Sanders, except he was more of a peace activist, so I'm thinking to myself, Tad Devine got hoisted by his own petard because here his own candidate, 30 years later, 35 years later, Bernie Sanders, almost 40 years later, actually, was defeated by the very system that he devised.
Well, I want your listeners to know that I am absolutely in favor of the abolition of superdelegates. It is a mechanism and a device to keep people like Ms. Pelosi entrenched in power and remote from their own voters. There's another thing going on in California, which is, I didn't know this until recently, but under the state Democratic Party rules, when an incumbent chooses to run again for the same seat, they get an automatic endorsement from the state party. Now, why should that be? They should be required to run on their record, and not just because their backside was sitting in the seat previously. So those are two reforms that I think must come, both to the national and, in this case, the California Democratic Party.
The protests in Chicago in 1968 were very much driven by the Vietnam War and the fact that we were getting into that quagmire. Now we've been in a quagmire. We started Afghanistan is our longest war. We've been in there for 15 years with no end in sight. Iraq, we still have people in there. And Obama actually got us into drone wars with 5 other countries without any of this going to Congress. And I was a delegate in Philadelphia. And when we were chanting no more war over all those freaking generals that Hillary trotted out, because she's trying to get the right-wing vote there. That's what she was more concerned about, the right-wing vote, the Republican vote, than the progressive vote. So we're chanting no more war, and they're turning off the lights on the Washington delegation so you couldn't see it, and they're drowning us out in California with the white noise. And then the final thing they did was they told the Hillary delegates to chant over us as we said no more war. They were supposed to say USA. And
I remember that.
It was mind-boggling because that is the chant that they use at Donald Trump, rallies. And I had
still do, yes.
Since when did trying to drown out a no more war message become the official platform of the Democratic Party?
Well, my answer is look at the leadership. Some Democrats claiming to be, I guess, the L word, liberal, certainly not progressive, are really Republican light, and what I call Republican light. And we have that in San Francisco. San Francisco will never, in the foreseeable future, elect a Republican. So the people who are to the right of people like me and are progressives, they call themselves moderates. But if they were anywhere else but San Francisco, they're Republicans. They're Republicans, Dinos, Democrats in name only. Well, corporate Democrats are the same thing. People that take huge sums of money from Republican corporations, banks. I mean, you know the list. Are not adhering to what I perceive to be Democratic Party values. I think it's impossible to do both. You
Right.
cannot serve two masters.
Well, the military-industrial complex is very crafty. I mean, they put factories, munitions factories, and whatnot in almost every congressional district. And in fact, Bernie Sanders was criticized during the campaign for supporting the F-45 bomber, which was produced in Vermont by a lot of peace activists who didn't want that in there. And of course, Barbara Boxer was supposed to be such a big peacenik, and yet she had, defense contracts in her district too. And I miss Dennis Kucinich, because when he was in the Congress, every year he would bring up his Department of Peace. And now that almost seems like such an antiquated, concept, with the Democrats joining the Republicans and being the party of war. I don't know how we're going to get out of this perpetual war that we're in. I'm just really stymied. I don't see the protests in the street, and I'm wondering if that has to do with the fact that they abolished the draft.
I think a lot of the wars that we have been engaged in are the product of the fact that our economy is military dependent. And I think a lot of it has to do that we need, in some people's minds, to be at war all the time or most of the time in order to keep the economy going. Obviously, look at the budget. About, I think, close to 50%, maybe it's a little less, almost 50% of the federal budget is for the military. If that money were available to do all the things that we're talking about, we would cure diseases, house the homeless. I mean, there's just no end of the things that would be available for us to do. But we're so dependent on military spending to keep the train going down the track. That's the real problem that's producing, in my view, producing the war.
Well, that's interesting because, Dianne Feinstein's husband, she was criticized for funneling a lot of contracts, to her businesses that her husband had interests in. And I know that because I did a Retire Feinstein protest. I actually did two of them, one at a fundraiser because she's making noises about running again, and then at her recent town hall here in Los Angeles. And I talked about her conflicts of interest, such as her husband, Richard Bloom, his company, CBRE, real estate company, has the exclusive no-bid contract to sell or lease all the post offices. And why are they selling and leasing the post offices? Because the Postal Accountability Act of 2006 basically said that the Postal Service has to pre-fund health benefits for retirees 75 years into the future. No other agency has to do that. And that is causing an agency that used to be in the black to be in the red. So they're selling and leasing post offices, and guess whose husband has that exclusive no-bid contract? Now, she pretended to not know what this act was, and she told me that her husband was not profiting from this, which is a bald-faced lie. And her husband and she also profit from, the water grabs, like the twin tunnels that Jerry Brown, this big boondoggle tunnel project that is not going to give us any new water, and is just, a big giveaway to big ag and big oil. See, they can have all the fresh water they need, like her friends, Linda and Stuart Resnick, who have the pistachio farms and the almond farms, which are very water-thirsty crops, which we shouldn't even be growing in a desert. But he's got the Kern Water Bank. It's sort of a semi-private partnership there that he controls the rights to. and it's forcing small family farmers to tap their groundwater. So the water table is going down, the earth is subsiding, and all the, big ag and big oil have all the fresh water they need. So the corruption is really huge. Now, I don't think.
Oh yeah, and why is Blum's contract no bid? That's the underlying issue. Why is it no bid?
So they make the commission on both the sale and, from the seller and from the buyer, and it never
Right.
goes out, to get a better price for the U.S. government. So it's very infuriating. Anyway, I'm sure our viewers want to know how they can get involved in your campaign, how they can support you. I've posted your Facebook page a few times. You don't have a website yet, right?
Yeah, yes, it went up today.
Oh, good. What is it?
It is Jaffe, the number 4, Congress.com.
You're looking for money. Are you asking for the $27 donation like all the other Bernie cracks?
That is the number. That is one of the choices there, yes.
And I'm sure you're also looking for some volunteers. So anyone who's up in, yeah.
Yes, I think the volunteers are going to be in our next wave of activity. Right now, we're trying to kickstart the campaign with the contributions, but we're also recording and saving the names of the volunteers, and we expect they'll be getting involved over the summer. As the campaign's doing well, frankly, what's amazing to me is that at least half of the donations and contributions are coming from out of state. And what that tells me, as much as I would like to take credit that people are giving all this money because I'm a wonderful guy and they like me and want to vote for me, that's not why they're giving it. They're giving it because they don't like Nancy Pelosi. This is an anti-Pelosi driven contribution right now, but I hope as the voters get to know me that they will like me as much as they dislike or may want Ms. Pelosi removed.
Right. Well, are you going to be soliciting the endorsement of Our Revolution and also Bernie Sanders himself? Because he's not allowed to coordinate with Our Revolution.
I've been trying to make sure Senator Sanders is aware of my candidacy. I'm not quite sure when that happens, how that will evolve. But certainly if he wants to endorse me, I'm not going to turn that down. He's a real role model for me.
Well, I've met Bernie 4 times, and I'm going to meet him again on Saturday. I'm going to this gala where he and Jane are being honored. So I've got a bunch of things. I have a bunch of things that I want to tell Bernie. I'm part of the Draft Bernie for a People's Party movement because I think that the Democratic Party is hopeless. And I really feel that more people are independents now than are Republicans or Democrats, not combined. There's still more Democrats and Republicans combined, but anywhere from 43 to 47% identify as independents, depending on what poll you look at. And I think that he's staying independent for a reason. I think he's very strategic, Bernie. And even though he's sort of given this position as director of outreach for the Democratic Party, you can see what he's doing. He's going around the country and specifically to Republican areas, basically giving his campaign stump speech. And hopefully the Republicans are going to figure out that they've been had. And should Bernie run again in 2020, either as an independent or as a Democrat, he's continuing his campaign. And as someone said, on the DNC's dime. So I thought that was very funny.
Yes, well, I appreciate the opportunity to be on here tonight very much. So thank you so much. I guess there's one other point I want to make. One of my most important planks is there's 3 topics, but they're really one issue. One is climate change / science denial / education. I think they're all 3 symptoms of the same issue, which is really education. People who are science deniers, people who are climate change deniers, people who are anti-vaxxers, all of those things are the products of lack of education. And that's why education is so important to me. And I intend to address that as much as possible when I'm in the Congress also.
Well, let me ask you this. This is a hot button issue for me. What do you think of charter schools? Do you think they should exist?
Not much, not much. And that's because I've had some personal um, legal professional experience with charter schools. They suck money out of the public education system, and they do not provide because a lot of charter schools now are these online schools,
Right.
or they're schools that are set up so that people who think they want to homeschool their kids can do that. And that a physical brick and mortar school provides a lot more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. It provides socialization. It provides adjustment to getting along with people who may not be like you or look like you, rather than some group in someone's home where everybody's like you because it's been assembled very carefully. So I am not a real big fan of charter schools.
Yeah, charter schools is just a new privatization scheme. They're trying to get access to those schools. It's an untapped market. All the other markets are kind of mature. So the education market is one that they're seeing a lot of dollar signs. And, the hardware companies like Bill Gates and, even Stephen Jobs, because they sell their computers and their iPads into these charter schools. And then there's the software companies like Pearson, which is the largest textbook manufacturer. They also do the test prep, the testing and the test prep curriculum. So they can sell these in much easier to charter schools, because charter schools, for the most part, do not have educators on their boards. They have business people on their boards. And so, and the outcomes, this meta-analysis that Stanford did, shows that they don't perform any better. And this is with what they call creaming, where they cream off the special ed school students, and they cream off the English language learners, and they cream off the behavioral problems. They push them back.
But I'll tell you why, because the people teaching them are not up to the same standards as the teachers in the public schools.
Right.
So you've got mothers who say, I'm going to go teach Johnny trigonometry. Well, mom doesn't know trigonometry. All she has is some teacher's guidebook. She's never taught trigonometry. She's never going to understand trigonometry. So where it may gain by skimming off kids that are harder to educate, it loses on the quality of the education.
Yes, and the other thing that you're mentioning is they don't hire unionized teachers. So unfortunately, the teachers union, which actually started charter schools, Albert Shankar, who I grew up
Yes.
in the New York Times, he started charter schools as a way to fend off vouchers, and now it's come back to bite the unions in the ass, because all they're doing, it's almost like they've given up and they're just trying to unionize charter school teachers. And the 4 bills that they have in the California legislature right now are about accountability and transparency. Now, to me, that's like regulating fracking as opposed to banning fracking. And I
Yes.
fought Fran Pavley's bill in 2013, SB4, which would have regulated fracking, and really it wouldn't have at all. It just provided political cover for those legislators to not vote for Holly Mitchell's fracking moratorium bill. So I think that charter schools should be banned altogether, and public schools should be, like you say, fully funded. Because every time someone goes out of the public schools into the charter schools, the money goes with them.
Yeah. Somebody just asked me if I'm for open primaries. Yes. Is that plain enough? Yes, I am.
All right, so we're
Right.
going to close the show now. I want to thank you very much for being with me, Stephen. It's been a pleasure to have you for this period. And I just want to promote my upcoming show on Sunday. I'm going to be very honored to have a congressman, a U.S. congressman on my show, Congressman Ro Khanna, who's from your neck of the woods. He's in
That's correct.
Silicon Valley, and he's really proving to be the Bernie Sanders of the House. He took to the floor of Congress in the early days and started speaking on behalf of Medicare for all. And he told Trump that he should really support Medicare for all, because Trump has in the past talked about his belief in universal health care. Of course, whatever Trump has ever said, he's completely gone back on, and we don't even know what he believes.
Trump asked today on national television, he doesn't understand why the Civil War occurred.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you.
Oh my God. Well, this is really a
That's a good thing. That's a good thing to end your show on,
yeah.
because that's a true statement.
Well, I want to put up my my YouTube channel here because I need subscribers on my YouTube channel. But what I do is I edit these videos and then I put them on my YouTube channel. And if I could get, I know this is really a reach because I don't have even 1,000 subscribers, but if I could get 10,000 subscribers, I get to use the YouTube studio here in Los Angeles for free. So I don't have to be depending on this kind of platform that always, goes on the fritz. So I would love for people to subscribe to my show, my YouTube channel, and follow me on Facebook because I do all these shows currently on Facebook Live using this Be Live platform. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much as I use Facebook, but I just want everybody to know that I am going to be starting a Patreon account soon and trying to raise money to do this because I'm really enjoying it. This is what I thought I would do all through high school and college and then ended up doing something completely different. So now I'm finally enjoying being a broadcast journalist and having excellent guests like Stephen Jaffe on my show.
Thank you so much.
You're very
Thank you, and thank you everyone who listened to me droning on and on.
Everybody have a great week, and remember, keep resisting in whatever way you can because we can get through this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. So have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.